you very much, Senator Golden Campbell. Senator Bunting, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
No, because he's more likely to be back here.
Mr. President, so soon as you're ready, you can I go ahead? I wanted your attention as my first. Mr. President, I know you like me to address the chair, so as a courtesy to you, while I see you're distracted, I will wait for your attention.
I'm sorry, Senator Bunting. You may proceed, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. President, when I heard your opening comments to Senator Lambert Brown, and I was reading the tea leaves, so to speak, I figured this may very well be the final sitting of the Senate.
No, I don't think so.
And well, I am reading the tea leaves, and I said, I will come and, not in a combative sense, because we will soon have a chance to meet on the campaign trail. But since Senator Sinclair decided to embark on his usual harangue, I think I must say a few words in response. Clearly I'm living rent-free in his head as well as Senator Chubby's head. So, because they always dedicate the better part of their contributions to me. But let me start with Senator Sinclair's comments on divine intervention. I make no apology for that, Senator Sinclair. I much prefer it to be that than seeking the intervention of my older man uncle, which my successor referred to. The truth of the matter is, the context in which I said it was that there had been a triple murder suicide, where a father had murdered his wife and 2 children and then committed suicide. And exactly the point that Senator Professor Morris made about you could not have police in every household in order to prevent crimes like that. In fact, only divine intervention touching the hearts of men could prevent those types of domestic murders. So we make no apology for that. Then, Senator Sinclair went on at length. Curiously, I thought he would have avoided it. Talking about 2015. And let me remind him, in 2015, we had 1,207 murders. Let us now go to 2016. We had 1,354 murders. Now, we then jumped in 2017 to 1,647 murders. Now, he's criticizing me for the 1,200, Within 2 years, they'd increased that by 30%. The murders. Let me explain to you what happened. You came into office in 2016, and you started to pursue this idiotic policy of purchasing used cars for the police. Many of which 10 years later have not been delivered. All the money was paid, yes, that is correct. So suddenly we found that for 2016 and 2017, the police were starved of vehicles. They lacked the mobility. And the significance of this, Mr. President, is that vehicles are a force multiplier. So when you take away the operational vehicles from the police, you are going to get the results that you see that occurred, that 30% increase within 2 years. But as if that wasn't bad and bad enough, in 2017, January, Minister Montague held a blast-off. A blast-off. You know, something I gather is common in the insurance sales industry. He held a blast-off to motivate the police for 27. And who did he bring to motivate them? Someone accused of murder and subsequently convicted of murder. I'm going to suggest that that was not a motivation for the police. That must have been demoralizing for the police. So imagine, first of all, they're put in a car, in a broke down old car, where if somebody sat the size of Senator Morgan sat in it, a policeman the size of Senator Morgan sat in it, it couldn't move off on a slope. It couldn't move off on a slope. And this was the embarrassment. The police were put in these wrecks for an inexplicable reason, because not a single other police force in the entire world had a policy of purchasing used cars. Not a single one. Not a single one. The mother of all bandulos. It was one of the most corrupt things that we have ever seen. That's how it went up to 1,647. I think that was the highest, it was the highest, second highest year in our history. So states of emergency were introduced and initially brought down murders to about 1,300. But they were then, you know, we warned that they may have an initial shock and awe effect. But after the first 6 months, we saw murders continuing to climb. 2019, 1,340. This is 4 years in now. 2019, more money being spent on the police than in history. We still see it climbing. We said then that, and we were the only ones who said it, Hartley Lewin, Rear Admiral Hartley Lewin, who had served both as CDS and as Commissioner of Police, said there was a misallocation of resources, because there we were increasing by thousands the JDF, when we kept saying that a soldier cannot do a policeman's job. But we were increasing the JDF, the strength and the establishment and the strength of the JDF, but not of the JCF. By 2019, again, 1,332, compared to the 1,209 that Senator Sinclair was complaining about. 1,332 by 2021, up to 1,474, much higher than the 1,209 that he's making a big deal from. 2022, 1,511. 2023, 1,400. All this time, states of emergency being used as a serial and routine use of policing, which we kept making a point was both unconstitutional and ineffective. As a result, what do we find? That after, even without counting any murders this year, even without counting any murders this year, by 2024, there had been 12,481 Jamaicans murdered under this two-term JLP administration, under this Prime Minister Andrew Holness. More Jamaicans murdered than under any other two terms in the history of this country. And on the basis of a 6-month reduction now, they want us to believe that this is a big success. A big success. A big success when more Jamaicans have been murdered under your administration than under any other two-term administration in the history of Jamaica. That is not success. That is not success.
Even when nobody will be a man.
Even when they will be a man. And the truth of the matter is that if we just go back to those 8 years, up to 2023, they averaged annually 1,416 murders, a 25% increase that resulted in 2,300 more lives lost than if the PNP's average numbers had been maintained. When did we see a meaningful reduction occur? After a number of challenges in court, in the Constitutional Court, a number of successful challenges, after we stopped these performative extensions by not supporting it in the Senate. The first year when basically 0 states of emergency were used was 2024. And that for the first time, it fell just above the average of what it was during the previous PNP administration. No, this is why I commend the Commissioner of Police, because he's rubbished that state of emergency approach. He has taken approach. He has taken the approach of focused deterrence. This is the law enforcement equivalent of spear fishing, Professor Morris. This is the law enforcement equivalent of spear fishing. The states of emergency was the law enforcement equivalent of net fishing. All it did was scrape up a whole heap of people who were never charged at the end and which had no effect, had no positive effect on reducing crime. In fact, the misallocation of resources means that that administration should account to the families of those 2,300 more persons murdered than if they had just maintained what they had inherited. So, you know, I really wasn't intending to go there. The question of funding, of course, we didn't have the funding, Senator Sinclair, because we inherited an economy on the verge of economic meltdown. And that's not my term, that's the IMF. Go to the IMF reports, and it will tell you that when we came to office in 2012, we inherited an economy on the verge of an economic meltdown. And we had to do the heavy lifting to return the government, the Jamaican government, to a sustainable fiscal path by 2016 February when we handed over, which is why you've been able to spend more resources on, you have been able to spend more resources on the police. But let me turn now, let me not be distracted any further in responding to these lightweights. Let me return to what I had intended to say on the bills. what else I had intended to say. This mandatory minimum sentencing issue sits at the intersection of justice, public safety, and our shared responsibility to create a society that is both secure and fair. And let me state clearly, Jamaica is under siege from violent crime. We live in a time when illegal firearms continue to devastate communities, when criminal gangs infiltrate our institutions, and when our citizens, especially the most vulnerable, cry out for justice and protection. The instinctive response has been to get tough on crime. In that spirit, multiple parliaments, many parliaments, have enacted legislation over a long period of time. I believe it began with the Patterson administration. Legislation that prescribed mandatory minimum sentences for certain serious offenses. I believe it was when the gun court was challenged, when that was challenged, that it was converted to mandatory life. It was indefinite detention. Indefinite detention. Okay, well that, so the first one went as far back as the 70s administration. So it's not something new in our system. And truthfully, the rationale is understandable. We want to send a strong signal that crime has consequences. We want to deter potential offenders. We want to restore public confidence in the rule of law. And we want consistency in sentencing across our courts. But there are sincere persons, including my colleague, Senator Lambert, and sincere people can have differences of opinion. And I think we have to bear in mind their views. Good intentions alone do not guarantee good outcomes. And the evidence, both international and right here in Jamaica, is not conclusive. There may be some evidence of a mild deterrence for firearm offenses. But on the other hand, we have seen where the rigid application of mandatory minimum sentences can also produce injustices, produce overcrowded prisons, and in many cases can produce counterproductive outcomes, such as case backlogs as it removes the incentives for plea bargaining. Far too often, it's the young men from marginalized communities, many first-time offenders, many coerced or manipulated, who find themselves serving lengthy prison terms under laws that make no distinction between a gang leader and a frightened, unemployed youth coerced to hold a bag or be a courier. Our judges, men and women with years of training and the benefit of hearing the full circumstances of each case, have their hands tied. They are unable to exercise discretion or show mercy where the facts and fairness would demand it. And so there is a risk of this approach of mandatory minimum sentences turning our justice system into a machine, mechanical, unforgiving, and blind to context. Even more worrying is that these laws, if not in Jamaica, but certainly globally, have disproportionately impacted the poor and dispossessed. They've widened the gap between uptown and downtown justice. And while the system punishes the low-hanging fruit with automatic sentences, the powerful often avoid prosecution altogether. And what about our correctional facilities? We all know they're overcrowded, under-resourced, and ill-equipped to rehabilitate. Although somebody says to me, well, if you're sending somebody to a 50-year mandatory minimum sentence, what is the point of rehabilitation? But the truth is that they will be serving in facilities with non-violent or minor offenders who will be influenced by them. And we want to prepare those persons, those inmates, for re-entry into society. So we have to be careful that we're not creating a finishing school for criminality. The opposition does not have any blanket objection to mandatory minimums. And I'm sorry, Senator Golding is not here, because in the debate in the lower house, that was quite clear. That was made quite clear. And in fact, it was carried in the media. So we are not, while there may be varying positions within our membership, there is no objection. There's no opposition objection to mandatory minimums. We understand that there are cases, repeat violent offenders, gang leaders, sexual predators, where strong, consistent sentences serve the interests of justice and public safety. But going forward, I think the Parliament might consider the establishment of an independent sentencing commission, as other countries have, that can guide Parliament and policymakers with evidence-based recommendations, and to ensure that our laws keep pace with fairness, proportionality, and modern penal philosophy. It can examine safety valve provisions, enabling judges to depart from the mandatory minimum where the offender played a minor role, acted under duress, or shows clear potential for rehabilitation. And above all, we need to stop pretending that sentencing alone can fix what is broken. We must invest in community-based diversion programs, youth rehabilitation, skills training, and restorative justice. We must address the root causes of crime, not just its symptoms. A just society is not one where the poor are punished swiftly and severely, while the privileged walk free. A just society is one where punishment fits not just the crime, but the circumstances, the offender, and the greater good. So yes, let us be tough on crime, but also let us be smart on justice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. Senator